Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be continuing with our VR walkthroughs, and this is another one of the slow walkthroughs. So these are the verbal reasoning official Ucat question bank questions from the first set. Okay, and I thought that I would go through these kind of explaining my logic in a little bit more of a slower manner, so perhaps you guys are able to understand these questions a little bit better, and hopefully this is useful. Okay, so let's have a go at this. So, what can be inferred from the passage about classical scholars? So, this is a question I would definitely skip. However, because all the answers are quite short, experts of language translation like to take risks, regard accuracy as crucial, want to change the original text, I'd probably just read it, just so I can bear it in mind, in case I manage to spot it while I'm looking at the other questions as well, if that makes sense. Okay, but out of these answer options, I'll be honest, if I was to guess and rule out, I'd probably rule out B, and I'd probably rule out D if anything. So I'd say one of these two probably what makes most sense. Okay, so let's keep going. According to the passage, which the following would not be a potential source of problem for classical scholars in their study of texts. Okay, so we could do this question. I mean, it's probably not the best one to do because it's still like not a direct keyword. Like I know how these questions work. What they're going to do is that I'm going to have to look for different things that are kind of scattered somewhat-ish all over, even if they are somewhat close to each other. Okay, so I probably would perhaps actually skip this one as well, but I would do it before the first question, if that makes sense. Why does the writer use the example of the tragedies of Aeschylus? Okay, I could do this one. Okay, let's have, if I was to guesstimate this at all, I can't really, so I'm just going to keep reading. And remember, when I read, if you guys are new here and this is the first video of mine you're watching, please do go check out my other videos in my verbal reasoning playlist where I explain my kind of ideas and knowledge and detail and the way that I try to do a VR in a little bit more detail. But let's have a look at this. So classical scholars travel all over Europe to track down and compare manuscripts. They scrutinize past editions and produce new ones of their own, which may involve identifying errors made by careless copyists and suggesting corrections to give a more accurate version of the text, sometimes even by the change of a letter or two. A modern editor will present any reader who comes to consult with a very different idea of some fundamental aspect or crucial detail of the classical world. How accurately, for example, the Romans understood the geography of Britain is an important question. How much, that is, do we imagine the Romans really knew about their conquered territories? The answer to this partly depends on whether you believe the Roman historian Tacitus compared the shape of the island to a diamond. Scutula in Latin, as all the manuscripts and most old editions have it, or a shoulder blade. Scapula, as the editor of the text writing in 1967 thought would be better. The business of producing editions of Greek and Roman authors is traditionally carried great prestige among professional scholars. It carries risks too. For the vast majority of attempts to produce a better text are destined to win only temporary approval and quickly forgotten. All the same, there's no alternative to taking the risks and trying at least to reach as accurate a view as possible of what ancient authors wrote. In fact, most obviously in works where the text is very still disputed, whether because the language itself is particularly difficult or the manuscript tradition unreliable. Every single scholar who comes to study the work is inevitably involved in debates about exactly originally what was written. So, I've been really unlucky here because it was the very last sentence that I read that contains the word Aeschylus. Obviously, I'm going to answer this question, but the point here is what I did there is not a waste of time. It's a waste of time if you read it and you didn't remember the ideas. Then yes, it's a waste of time. But remember, with the deep skin, I will hopefully have remembered a fair amount of this. Okay, so let's get to this bit. This is the case of some of the most famous literature to survive from the ancient world, such as the tragedies of the Athenian dramatist Aeschylus, whose text must attract a host of suggested improvements and confessions of bafflement. So it says debates about exactly what was written. I think D is probably the one that makes the most sense. I probably could have ruled out C. I think this is true, but it's not why the writer uses the example. Remember, just because a statement is true, I mean, actually, I guess I guess we don't necessarily, this is probably true, but it's not the answer to this question. Okay, so just something to think about. One of the kind of key ways to rule things out. Okay, what is the significance of the distinction made in the passage between scutula and scapula? So I remember, middle paragraph. Okay, so let's have a look. Classical scholars advancing and then studying Romans. That's wrong. It says the Roman knowledge of British geography was uncertain. Okay, could be B. It indicates classical scholars do not know which interpretation is right. But that wasn't what the significance of the distinction was. So I'd say that's C's rule. It shows how much Romans knew about Britain. Well, that's what it says here. How accurately the Romans understood the geography of Britain is an important question. Okay. So I would say the distinction tells us about this. Okay, I would say therefore that this is an important thing to consider, and I'd say that I'd probably say D is the answer based off on this idea. Okay, it shows how much the Romans knew about Britain. Once again, I'm not entirely sure. I guess B could kind of be right, but remember what I said with these questions. just choose your answer and move on. I'm not going to waste that additional 20-30 seconds trying to take time to figure out which of the two it's going to be. Okay, now I'm going to go back. Okay, remember, I'm going to do this one first. Which of the following would not be a possible source of problem? So, difficulties in finding manuscripts. I remember reading about that. Okay, I remember reading about that. So, I remember reading this. This one I don't necessarily remember reading specifically about. Mistakes made when texts are copied. Once again, I do remember reading that as well, because it says careless copyists. Difficulties of language. I remember to some extent about that. So I think it was down here. Language itself is particularly difficult, or manuscript tradition unreliable. So therefore, A is the only one that's not mentioned. So you can see here that time that I spent on that first question, yes, I spent quite a lot of time. Obviously, I wouldn't have read it as slowly as this, but the point is that I spent quite a lot of time on it. But these other questions I'm able to kind of rattle through much more easily, and therefore the questions become much more doable. What can be inferred in the past about classical scholars? The experts of language translation like to take risks, regard accuracy as crucial. I'd probably say this is the answer. And perhaps you could have guesstimated this as well, just based off these, like, B probably doesn't make sense. It only makes sense. So I remember I'd said it's going to be one of these two. So I think it's probably because it says about careless copyists, suggesting correction to give more accurate version, crucial detail, blah, blah, blah. So I think C is the only one here that kind of makes sense. Okay, and yes, you could have guesstimated it, but this way of this specific order that I did the question definitely helped me. Okay, next passage. So the iconic zombie of George Romero's classic film Night of the Living Dead little resembles its modern counterpart. So based on the information in the passage, what can be inferred about traditional zombie culture? Okay, so once again, this is quite a general, you've got four kind of ideas here. I'm going to have a quick read of it. Too gory, not very popular, portrayed zombies as simple monsters, dealt with as societal impacts. I feel like D is quite a niche idea, the societal impacts of zombies, so I'd probably rule out D. It was gory, not very popular, portrayed symbol. It could be any one of these, realistically. Yeah, it could be any one of these. So I'm just going to roughly bear it in mind. So this whole thing that I've explained to you, this kind of thought process, will probably have taken me about 5 seconds. The idea is I just read them all. Okay, probably not D. Gory, popular, simple monsters. Fine. Go to the next question. Not going to waste time on it. This one definitely going to be a skip. If the information is presumed to be true, which of the following must also be true, definitely going to skip. Okay. Based on the information in the passage, what can be inferred about contemporary fans of zombie culture? Okay, so once again, this is, I could do because it's a specific kind of question. Like it's a very, very, it's a very, very specific question. It talks about the contemporary fans, so I probably would do it, but the answers do look a little bit longer. So I'm just going to go forward, see if I can figure out anything. Okay, the contemporary zombie, like see if there's any nicer questions, basically. The contemporary zombie differs from most from the traditional zombie in that it's more human, not as scary, more popular, not as relevant. Okay, so once again, perhaps not the best one to, I think I'm probably going to have to do one of these two. Of these two, I think this one is probably makes more sense. So contemporary zombie differing from traditional. So as zombie culture is embraced by successive generations, it has become increasingly more nuanced. The prevalence of zombies in all facets of media suggests that there is something about this monster that has universal appeal. While the gruesome, moaning horrors remain alive and well in video games, including the Resident Evil and Left 4 Dead game series, contemporary audiences have become more interested in what comes after the zombie apocalypse. Okay, so I mean, from here, I would say that it is not as relevant. I'd probably rule out, if anything, because yeah, this I just feel like doesn't really make sense here. It could be any one of the others, really. In The Last of Us, console gamers are treated to a complex plot where the living, not the undead, are the dominant forces for evil. In Mira Grant's Feed and subsequent novels Deadline and Blackout, and the political intrigue of a world recovering from a massive zombie outbreak eclipses the threat of another zombie attack. Max Brooks's novel World War Z, an oral history of the zombie war, reads more like an account of the Second World War than it does traditional horror. It examines how government failure to act led to even greater devastation at the hands and mouths of the zombie horde. Okay, so this is talking about okay, so something about the kind of video games as such. Okay, I haven't really found my answer yet though, and I'll be honest with you guys, I probably wouldn't have done this passage, but obviously I have to do it now here because I'm doing the question. But I probably wouldn't have this passage yet. Wasn't really a fan of, so I probably wouldn't have done as such. Okay, so yeah, let's keep going. The contemporary zombie. Okay, now my ears prick up. So it cannot even be expected to remain the villain. The main character is a zombie who attempts to regain his humanity. Protagonist defends himself against zombie-like humans who display a capacity for compassion. Growing popularity with its title speaks to the maturing interests of zombie fans, the ability for zombie culture to appeal to readers, gamers, and moviegoers alike. They may have grown up Sam Raimi's over-the-top antics in the Evil Dead film series, but they want today's zombies to give them something more to chew on than brains. So I'd probably say A is probably the more answer. It's probably the correct answer. It's not as scary. I don't necessarily think you can say that because it says gruesome moaning horrors remain alive and well. So yeah, I probably should have ruled out that before. Is more popular. I think it says it's being embraced, but I don't think you can definitively conclude that, if that makes sense. Okay, so based on the past, what can be inferred about contemporary fans? They're well-educated, interested in such issues, older and more mature than perhaps previous generations, not interested in any films or novels that feature a traditional zombie, influenced by some enjoy a new perspective. This was that last line that I read. I guess I got lucky here because I remembered it because it was the last thing I read. But they want today's zombies to give them something more to chew on than brains. It's gonna be D. Okay, so you can see what I mean. Taking that extra time to read a question, read more of the passage on a certain question, isn't necessarily a bad thing. If the information is presumed to be true, which the following must also be true. Okay, so what can be inferred about traditional zombie culture? It was too gory, not very popular, portrayed zombies as simple monsters, dealt with societal impacts. Well, what did we just answer here? We just said that the contemporary zombies, you want them to give them something more to chew on. So you want to give them more details. So that must mean that it must portray zombies as simple monsters. B is not going to be right. We'd already ruled out D. A doesn't say it was too gory, not necessarily. It says the gruesome moaning horrors remain alive, but there's no comparison, so I think it has to be C. Going back to this one, if the information is presumed to be true, which of the following must also be true? Night of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead is an obsolete film. Horror genre encompasses more than just gore. Zombie culture will become even more popular as time goes on. What zombie fans will continue to change through the years. So I think it's probably going to be this one because remember down here about main character who displays capacity for compassion, maturing interests, want them to give something more to kind of thingy, and also I guess here as well it says about the traditional horror. So I think it talks about complex plots. I think B is probably the one I would say with more. I'd say it makes the most sense. This one it says that it's being embraced by successive generations, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's safe for certain. It has to be more popular as time goes on, right? Um, and then with Night of the Living Dead, so here says it doesn't really say it's an obsolete film. Well, it says it's like the iconic zombie of his classic film, so I don't want to say it's obsolete. It will continue to change through the years. We don't know that. We know that there is a change and does they want them to give them something more to chew on, but there's not a lot else we're told about this info. Okay, so that's probably the order I would do this one in. But I'll be honest, this is probably one of those passages I would skip. Remember what I told you guys. I decide whether or not to do a passage or a set of questions, not based on the questions themselves, but on the passage. And so here, yes, it's short, but I'm not really a fan of it. That's the idea. Like this topic, really not comfortable with. It's an article question. I'm out of my depth. Don't really want to be doing it. Okay? So that's the main kind of idea as such. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. I can try and do a couple more of these slow walkthroughs, kind of just going and running through and finishing off this VR kind of subtest here as such. But please do let me know what else you'd like to see next, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you as always.